Good evening and welcome to Poland Daily News. I'm Nicholas Richardson. The Israeli army launched an invasion of Lebanon last night. The ground army attack was preceded by hours of bombardment and artillery fire. According to Tel Aviv, this is a preemptive strike against Hezbollah forces. The terrorists were said to be preparing an attack similar to the one carried out by Hamas a year ago, killing more than 1,500 people in one day. These are pictures from a dozen minutes ago. Iran attacked Israel with ballistic missiles. Some of them were intercepted by the Iron Dome. Some fell on the outskirts of Tel Aviv. This is Iran's response to Israel's invasion of Lebanon. This is what the tunnels discovered by Israeli forces on the border with Lebanon are supposed to look like. These are the tunnels with which, according to Israeli intelligence, Hezbollah wanted to lead an attack on Jewish settlements in the north of the country.
Hezbollah turned Lebanese villages next to Israeli villages into military bases, all ready for an attack on Israel. Hezbollah had prepared to use those villages as staging grounds for an October 7th style invasion into Israeli homes.
That's why Tel Aviv authorities maintain that the ground operation in Lebanon is self-defense and a preemptive strike against terrorists. Shortly after 9 o'clock in the evening Polish time, the Israeli military crossed the border and launched an attack. It was preceded by a panicked flight by the Lebanese army. This war is characterized by the fact that we are fighting on 7 different fronts, something we have never done before, from Gaza to Judea and the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iraq and Iran. At the same time, Israel has also attacked Houthi militia positions in Yemen, targets in Syria and Iraq. It also continues to bomb southern Gaza. Hezbollah representatives have called for all Muslim countries in the Middle East to rise up and join the fight against Israel. We know that the struggle may be long and the options are open to us. We will face every possibility. We are prepared. The resistance forces are ready for a ground clash. Concerns are growing about the possible full-scale involvement of Iran and Syria in the fight, which would draw a likely American response.
I met with the Iranian foreign minister last week, and we had a detailed discussion. And of course, I was urging Iran to show restraint.
According to experts, Iran may not have the conditions for an open war with Israel and, by extension, the United States. Likewise, Syria, whose army is still healing its wounds from the war with the Islamic State. Other than this protest and various actions, more in the verbal sphere, I don't expect that Israel can be effectively stopped anytime soon. This means that Israel has hit the moment when it can definitively deal with both Hamas and Hezbollah, with the tacit acquiescence of its allies and in the face of protests that do not directly threaten it. And that means southern Lebanon may be in for what's in store for Gaza. Mark Rutte, the former long-term Dutch Prime Minister, took over as Secretary-General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization today. Rutte has recently been known for his uncompromising support of Ukraine, which is fighting Russian aggression, but has some ambiguous actions in his political past, led by his support of the German-Russian Nord Stream gas pipeline project and his authorship of the idea of a European Union without Poland, accused at the time by Brussels of alleged violations of the rule of law. Rutte's term as NATO chief is to last for 4 years.
During his first press conference, after taking over as NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte said,
Cost of supporting Ukraine is far, far lower than the cost we would face if we allow Putin to get his way.
Rutte was the Dutch Prime Minister with the longest tenure in the country's history. He was in office for 13 years. For most of that time, the Netherlands failed to carry out NATO's requirement to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. Only from 2022 did the Netherlands come close to that goal, and only slightly exceeded it in 2023, the same year Rutte left Dutch politics. It's hard not to see the connection here between this increase in defense spending and the candidacy of the country's prime minister for the top NATO post. Rutte is often nicknamed Teflon Mark because of his ability to make even the most difficult compromises. He is able to talk to everyone. He has good relations with German politicians. He is able to flexibly adapt to the winds of history. If they blow towards Russia, if this situation changes, he becomes a hawk. Because Rutte was previously one of the proponents of the German-Russian Nord Stream gas pipelines. To this day, on the YouTube channel of the company that built the pipelines, there is a video posted in which Rutte argues.
It's hard to overstate the importance of the Nord Stream project. The International Energy Agency calls this the golden age of gas, and with good reason. Natural gas is relatively cheap and much cleaner than other fossil fuels.
After the Russian aggression against Ukraine and the downing by Russian terrorists over Donbass of the Malaysian Boeing MH17, killing the nearly 300 people on board, including mostly Dutch citizens, Rutte became known as a supporter of supporting Ukraine. Under his rule, a decision was made for the Netherlands to donate a dozen F-16 fighter jets to Kiev. After the war broke out, the views of Prime Minister Rutte changed. He was one of those leaders who admitted that this policy toward the Russian Federation was wrong. Rutte also became known as a critic of the so-called violations of the rule of law, allegedly taking place in United Right-ruled Poland. Such an assertive position of ours, and our growing economic role as well, is certainly not to the taste of Western European countries. They have tried to sabotage this, to break it up, and at the same time, these countries have supported such a government in Poland, which will not raise its head too much. During this period, Rutte also co-authored the idea of a European Union without Poland and Hungary, and was one of the initiators of plans to withhold approval of Poland's national reconstruction plan. He is not a politician who can be categorized as part of the conventional camp of Friends of Poland or Friends of Central Europe. This is a politician who often aggressively and primarily puts the Netherlands' interests first. Interestingly, at the time when the exchange of names for the new staffing of the NATO authorities began, besides Mark Rutte, one of the mentioned candidates for deputy head of the alliance was Poland's ambassador to NATO, Tomasz Trzaskowski. However, Tusk's coalition, from the Foreign Ministry to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Administration, pulled the heaviest guns against him. This is how Donald Tusk spoke about Trzaskowski in the parliament. There were such suggestions that Mr. Trzaskowski would be a candidate from the president's side for one of the top positions in NATO, and there was a real threat that he could win. What took over was internal political logic and probably some emotion of Donald Tusk himself towards a good civil servant, dare I say a statesman, a man who thinks in terms of the state and thinks in terms of our security. As a consequence of the Tusk government's actions, Tarja Jakola from Finland became the deputy head of NATO for defense investments, and there is no one from Central or Eastern Europe in the current NATO leadership.
President Andrzej Duda is intervening in the Polish judicial chaos. Today he met the legitimate national prosecutor Dariusz Barski. The issue of lawlessness in the prosecutor's office has resurfaced following Friday's Supreme Court ruling that Dariusz Barski is the national prosecutor. Despite the Supreme Court's decision, Adam Bodnar's people are not allowing Prosecutor Barski to do his job. National Prosecutor Dariusz Barski has reported to the President on the recent illegal actions of Minister Adam Bodnar's people. The President is considering what legal action to take in this situation. Any decision taken by an unauthorized body is, in principle, an invalid decision. This is confirmed by this situation from a few months ago, highlighted by Radio WNet. The judge, Pavel Dobosh, who belongs to the ranks of the Justia supporters and is not called a neo-judge by the pro-government circles, questioned the status of the acting prosecutor, Jacek Bilewicz. He disagreed with the application of operational control to a citizen appointed by the prosecutor's office, pointing to the flawed status of then-acting prosecutor Jacek Bilewicz. This is a whole series of procedural actions that are currently being challenged due to the fact that there was an illegal takeover of the National Prosecutor's Office in the name of some political intention. It all started in January when Adam Bodnar stopped recognizing Dariusz Barski as National Prosecutor hour by hour, claiming that he had returned from retirement in violation of the law. In his place, he appointed acting prosecutor Jacek Bilewicz in a way that was not allowed by law. Adam Bodnar's attempt to force his way into the prosecutor's office was recorded by Deputy Attorney General Robert Hernand.
Na jakiej podstawie został odwołany pan prokurator krajowy? Na podstawie przepisów artykułu 47.
To uprzejmie informuję pana ministra, z szacunkiem dla pana ministra pełnym, ale uprzejmie informuję pana ministra, że pana decyzja jest bezprawna i nosi znamiona popełnienia przestępstwa.
Subsequently, the Minister of Justice announced a competition for a national prosecutor and Dariusz Korneluk was appointed, illegally. Since then, the prosecutor's office, run by Adam Bodnar's people, has had many spectacular successes, such as the illegal detention of Marcin Romanowski. As recently as August, Korneluk himself assured that the controversy surrounding the prosecutor's office would be resolved by a Supreme Court ruling. And indeed, the criminal chamber of the Supreme Court ruled that Dariusz Barski was the national prosecutor.
Czy o to chodzi?
Is this the point that the legislature has no control over itself, that citizens are powerless against the state, that they have no judicial protection? It would seem that after the Supreme Court's decision, the authority would give in. However, this was not the case, and the services of Adam Bodnar still do not allow Dariusz Barski to enter the National Prosecutor's Office.
Pustka i tam jest główne wejście i tamtędy przechodzimy.
Panie prokuratorze.
Ale to jest rzecznik, jest prokurator. Ja nie mogę tutaj.
Ale co pani wydał takie polecenie, jeśli mogę?
Prokurator krajowy.
Nie, to właśnie pan jest prokurator krajowy.
Lawyers who have traditionally supported Donald Tusk's camp are in an extremely difficult position. On the one hand, they see extreme violations of the law. On the other hand, they want to remain loyal. In light of Friday's resolution, from a formal point of view, the national prosecutor should be Dariusz Barski, but the current situation is closer to the rule of law. One must admit that Donald Tusk's team is consistent in its actions. First, the Prime Minister promised to act according to the law as he understands it, and a month ago, he announced that he would continue to break the law.
Mamy dzisiaj potrzebę.
Today we have the need to act in these terms of democracy fighting for survival. We will probably make mistakes more than once or commit acts which, according to some legal authorities, are incompatible or not fully in accordance with the provisions of law. Such actions are an obvious negation of the rule of law and lead Poland into a state of dangerous anarchy. If someone says that he cannot govern without violating the law, well, he should not govern. This is quite obvious. It follows from the oath he has taken. On assuming the office of Prime Minister, I solemnly swear that I will be faithful to the provisions of the Constitution and other laws of the Republic of Poland. Despite such a blatant case of law breaking, the EU bureaucracy remained silent throughout. When there was a shadow of a doubt under the Law and Justice government, the European Parliament, the European Commission and every other possible organisation sounded the alarm. Now that people from their political bubble are in power, everything is fine.
Paweł Buch, Republika.
In a few hours' time, the final debate of this year's United States presidential election campaign will begin in New York. The vice presidential candidates of both parties will face each other. Tim Walz on the Democratic side and J.D. Vance on the Republican side. With polls showing no clear frontrunner in the race for the White House, this debate could determine the outcome of the presidential election in November.
This will be the last chance to convince the unconvinced. After the televised debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, the polls did not budge. So it's time for their running mates.
And of course, with this debate, even though they're the vice presidential candidates, it's kind of the closing argument in a way. It's the last time we will see the opponents on stage together. And it's the last time for anybody to do any sort of comparison shopping in that regard.
And the comparison of the politicians is as follows. Republican J.D. Vance, in his 40s, was born into a poor family in Middletown, Ohio. Through hard work, he graduated from Yale Law School and then joined the military. He has been a senator from Ohio for 2 years. He calls his opponent a left-wing radical.
Tim Walz's record is a joke. He's been one of the most far-left radicals in the entire United States government at any level.
Democrat Tim Walz is in his 60s and has made a name for himself as a high school football coach, National Guard soldier, and governor of the state of Minnesota. He calls his opponent a little Trump.
These guys are creepy and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see.
This debate is also the biggest political challenge for both candidates.
Będą starali się uwiarygodnić w oczach
They will try to gain credibility among the American electorate, those who are more grounded, closer to the political center, on the most important issues, such as inflation and migration. The debate is scheduled to last 90 minutes. The candidates will have 2 minutes each to respond. They will have the same amount of time to respond to their opponent's answers. In addition, the organizers have allocated 1 minute each for additional comments on the topic. Questions will only be asked by the moderators, journalists from CBS. Some changes have been made from the last presidential debate because, according to many commentators, Donald Trump had to contend not only with Kamala Harris, but also with the moderators.
Organizatorzy I dziennikarze tej debaty Vance-Walz,
Well, the organizers of this debate have already announced that they will not be doing so-called fact-checking. They will not be correcting what each candidate says. It is up to the candidates, Walz, Vance, to say to the other what you said is not true. The stakes in this debate are high. Every word, every facial expression, every gaffe could make or break the presidential election.
We know that this is a very, very, very close race. And so thought about from another perspective, you have maybe 5 or 6% of the electorate still on the fence, still undecided, and little things could push them in one direction or another.
The debate begins at 3 a.m. Polish time.
That's the news. Thank you for watching, and from me, have a good night and a better tomorrow.